I'm Major Dennis R. Kelly, employed by the Baton Rouge City Police Department for 30 years. And during that time, I had the distinct pleasure of being able to work for the state police, the sheriff's departments in the area, 7 surrounding parishes, and then went on the Louisiana State Police Assistance Board and worked with numerous other agencies. Some dope deal going on right there. And this was the biggest drug house in Baton Rouge at one time. They cooked more crack cocaine in that house than any other house in the city. Worked with the FBI on the Violent Crime Task Force because of the number of informants that I had at the time, and was able to later on retire from the city and actually work with the U.S. Marshals down at the federal courthouse as a court security officer. And during that period of time, I also maintained a business. And I also maintained 240 informants, which is quite a feat. I had a tree service, and I worked with the good, the bad, and the ugly, I used to say. And sometimes they were suspects, and sometimes they were friends. And I grew up right here in Baton Rouge, was born in New Roads, 30 miles north of here on the river, grew up a country boy, and learned how to hunt. And when I became a policeman, my mom says, "Now you're a soldier of God." My dad was a policeman. I'd seen in his career the things that he was forced to have to do and things that he did that he shouldn't have done, in my opinion. And so I wanted to be different. And I think I was. And I think I made a difference. There's only 2 things that really make this world work. One is fear, and one is love. That's it. And you have to be able to instill fear into the criminal element to be able to control it. You also have to instill love into the criminal element to make them know that if they do the right thing, you're going to help them. And you're going to get them through these rough points. Death by association is something that each person can actively control. It's one of the things that we actually have that control as people. I look at a person, if I have the opportunity to look at them in the eye, and I just kind of feel them for a minute before I even try to talk to them. I just look at them. Usually they're going to tell me by just with their eyes or their, I can't think of the right word right now, the persona. They're going to tell me whether I want them around me or not. And if I don't think I want them around me, I'm not going to talk to them beyond that point. Probably won't say anything. "Now you need to go on, buddy. I appreciate you stopping by. I don't have any work right now." Death by association is a weakness on in a person's heart to be too nice, too naive, too trusting. Look at people for what they are. Be godly, but look at people for what they are. Look them in the eye, look at them. If they don't look at you, you don't want them around you. And that's the best advice I can give and the best statement I can give to who can hurt you. If they can't look at you, then they can hurt you. Little shooting, and we went around the corner and we were checking, and we came to a warehouse, and we smelled marijuana. And we were asking one of the guys that was hanging around there if he was smoking marijuana, and the guy goes, "No, I wasn't smoking any dope, but I thought I smelled some dope too." Well, then Wendell comes around the corner and he says, "What are y'all doing here?" And I said, "Well, we was working a little shooting around the corner." He said, "Well, this is an undercover operation. Y'all need to get the hell out of here." So we did. Come to find out, the warehouse was full of weed, but we didn't know it. Tina evidently met a guy. We don't know how, but it was just in passing in the ballrooms, and this guy evidently took a shine to her and possibly came over a few times. We don't know that for a fact. We suspect it. But he knew where she lived, and it had these parties there where they would invite people that they would meet at the bars. So Tina meets this really nice guy. He works in the oil field, seems like a nice guy. He's got a good job. She hits it off. She brings him home. They go to bed a little early. They're both naked in the bed asleep, and the next thing you know, the guy wakes up and it's so hot in the house that he can't believe it. And he's like, man, why is it so hot in here? So he gets up and he's looking around for Tina, and she's not there. And he goes into the roommate's room and he says, is Tina in here? And she goes, no. And he says, well, why is it so hot? She said, I don't know, I was getting ready to get up too. It's burning up in here. And so they go looking around the house, no Tina. They look in the spare bedroom, and there Tina lays on the floor, spread eagle, naked as she was when she went to bed, and she's laying in this completely exposed position. And it's obvious that she has been raped and strangled and possibly struck in the head. Detectives get there, they want to fingerprint the body, and they're trying to get with the state police to fingerprint the body because she was strangled. And sometimes we can get prints like that. If you have a victim that's in a house in a good state with air conditioning and not too much humidity, if you can fingerprint the body, that's a big deal. But if it's out in the grass or in the yard or in a field, you're not going to be able to get any prints because they're going to be destroyed. Of course, the guy that she was brought home, he's the #1 suspect. This poor guy, you know, he's like, man, look, I had a few beers. I made love to this girl 3 or 4 times. We had a great time. We go to sleep. It takes a long, long time for us to finally, after going through many suspects, whom one of them was the head of a motorcycle gang and was a really Billy badass, and actually got off on the fact that he was a suspect in the murder and was telling everybody in town he was a suspect in the murder. That's how bad he was. When he knew he didn't do it, and we later on proved he didn't. And then his friend that ran with him was another suspect, and we found out he wasn't even in town when she was killed, so he wasn't a suspect any longer. Of course, the boyfriend that was sleeping with her, they had the oil field job, he's, you know, been through hell and back with this whole case because, you know, he was the #1 suspect. So now we had 3 suspects is all we had, and now we have none. At about 3 years, if you haven't been able to do something with a case in 3 years, you know it's a cold case. After almost 30 years, a policeman's daughter, during the Derek Todd Lee serial killer days, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on, and the other serial killers we actually had 5 serial killers in Baton Rouge at one time. And this guy would have been number 6, who we identified, had we not identified him and stopped him when we did. And it was all due to a young lady working in a crime lab, and her dad was a retired Baton Rouge City policeman in narcotics, and she decided that she would like to run that DNA that they had there that they couldn't run, it had never been run, and she was on top of all these old cold cases, and she was really into it, and she wanted to run it. Well, when they got the money for the serial killers, they actually got new equipment and got a lot of things, and Jim Churchman, and so she pulled that file, and in that file was DNA that had been recovered by the detectives and the crime scene people from the city and the state, and had been placed in evidence. When she ran that DNA sample, which there was plenty of, not only on Tina's clothes, but a rag or a t-shirt that was found there that had DNA on it, and plenty on her. When she ran that, she got a positive hit to a guy named Vernon. And Vernon, the reason that his DNA was in the system was because he was doing 20 years, for a murder of a 71-year-old man in just a little motel hotel that they found dead, and they were able to convict him of that case in Georgia. And he was in prison. He had hit that man in the head, and he had turned the heat up in the room and had it as high as it would go, which was the same thing he did in Tina's case. When they were able to do these interviews with this guy, they found out a lot about his past, and found out that he would bury cats in the ground and then take a lawnmower and run over their heads, which All your serial killers have these type of tendencies. They don't always live them out, but this guy did. We believe that she met him out because she had told somebody else that she had met this guy and that he had kind of hanging around and she had seen him 2 or 3 different times and that he had wanted to come by our house and may have come by our house. We don't know. But he knew where she lived. He knew how to get in and he knew the pattern of the parties, and so he was able to use that. And again, you give up too much information about your life to people you don't know, sometimes it can really hurt you or kill you. I shoot a 30-06 rifle as a rule. That's my favorite weapon because if you hit something with that gun, they will be dead. They will not be wounded. And it's just an amazingly accurate little gun. So as I traveled down Government Street, and there was a man running down the street hollering next to my favorite barbecue place, Jay's Barbecue off of Government, and he had a gun in his hand. And so I drove up to him and, "Is that your gun?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, will you put it in your pocket?" And he said, "Okay." And he was very nice, but I could tell he was very, very upset, but that he was not agitated, he was fearful. So as I go up to the guy with the gun in the street that's waving and hollering police, I said, "What's going on, buddy?" I said, "Just settle down, calm down, tell me what's going on." And he runs this quick story down to me about how he had hired a guy and he was the manager of Popeyes and he was just frantic and talking really fast. And he said, "I think he's in my house down there." And so I said, "Well, you want to get in the car? We're right." "No, it's right here." So he's walking on the side of my unit and I'm pulling down there and we stopped. And we get out, and of course I'm concerned because he's got a gun. I asked him, I said, "Is this your gun?" And he said, "Yes, it's my gun, and it's a big gun." And it was like a 44. He was carrying it in a way that I felt comfortable with him. He actually told me when I had him on the side of the car and we were walking, I said, "Is that your gun?" He said, "Yes, it is, and I have a permit for it." And I said, "Great." And I said, "I want you to put it in your pocket for me, and we're going to go up to your house and we're going to look around and see if there's a problem." We just kind of walked in here and went through the little gate. It was different then, and went around the back. And the guy was obviously left footprints behind showing where he had actually went in through the gate, stepped in the mud, and walked up on the steps. And there it was, just plain as day. Anybody that was paying attention could actually see that someone had been in his house, or at least attempted to get in the house. So we get there, and I said, "Did you touch the gate?" He says, "No, I was getting ready to, and I noticed it wasn't closed all the way." And I said, "Well, that's good observation." And he said, "You see my steps? You see how clean they are? There's mud on them." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." And you get on the side of me, and I could see, and I could tell by this time the yard was perfect. The steps were perfect. Everything was in a place. If he's in my house, it's probably going to be this guy that I fired, because he's been telling people he was going to kill me. And he said, he's going to be in the broom closet. There's no other place for him to hide in my house but in my broom closet or my bedroom closet. And he said, so I opened the door very quietly and kind of peeped in a little bit, looked around, and there was mud in that small amount of steps on the kitchen floor. 2 steps to the left. And I said, "What's to the left?" And he said, "The broom closet." So that's when I told the guy, "Baton Rouge City Police, come out with your hands up, drop your weapon, put it out." And I could hear a little bit of a scuffling when I said that, because I don't think he knew we were there, because we were talking very low, and he was inside the house. And it took him a couple of minutes, and I said, "Okay, if you don't come out now, I'm gonna start shooting into the closet," which I wouldn't have done, but he didn't know that. We use that a lot. And he said, "You can't do that." I said, "The hell I can't." I said, "I'm fixing to start shooting. You come out right now, boy." And he said, "I'm coming out." I said, "Well, get on the floor. Crawl out, get on the floor, and slide your gun across the floor." "How you know I got a gun?" I said, "I know you got a gun. Slide the gun out of here. I'm watching you." Well, I really wasn't. I was just kind of on the angle of the door in case he shot through the door. And so I heard the gun slide, and We stepped in there, and as we were stepping in, there he is. He's all dressed in black with gloves and a black hat and the black clothes. And a lot of the people we end up arresting, they have on all black. Isn't that amazing? Especially when they're pulling burglaries in the daytime. But this was rather unusual because it was a bright sunny day, even though it was chilly. It was not a day that you would have been wearing black in the daytime. We're going in, of course, the guy's getting his gun out too, which I didn't really see him do. He just kind of did it. But when we got in there and the guy's on the floor, he had his gun out, and that's when I told him, I said, just keep your gun on him. I said, I'm gonna take a picture. And I did. And of course I had my gun in my other hand. The perpetrator, while we had him on the floor under 2 guns and a photograph, actually admitted that he had gone there with the intent in his heart to kill this man because this man had belittled him in front of some ladies that he knew that worked in the churches. I mean the Popeye's chicken. When we showed it to the attorneys that were going to handle the case, they pled him guilty immediately. Probably the most intelligent thing he did was not busting in that house. He actually said he stood by the gate and thought about it. And he says, if he's in there with a gun and I go in there, we're going to shoot it out in our kitchen, in my kitchen. And he said, I didn't want that in my house. It's so hard to know who to bring home, who to meet, how to talk. But look at people. When you meet people, look at them. Don't just glance at them and say he's good looking or he's unattractive. Look at them. Try to look in their soul. Look inside of them. Talk to them a little bit. If they're a little shady or they feel a little, they're going to move away. And you can usually get some kind of sense. Trust your instincts. But if you don't get enough information from the person, then your instincts don't kick in. So get enough information from them if you're going to talk to them, if you're attracted to them, if you're going to give them information where you live or invite them to your house for a party. Then your instincts will usually take care of you. I tell these stories because they're important to me, because I want people to understand that they can learn from these stories and it can protect them from the bad guy. And that I really believe that if they pay attention in their life, they can avoid these pitfalls. And it can be so good for them in their whole life and how they live their life. You don't have to go out there and lay down with the dogs, as my grandfather used to say. If you lay down with dogs, you get fleas. And that's a very simple explanation for what happens to a lot of people that end up getting killed by their associates.